As we have quorum, I'd like to welcome everybody to meeting number 59 of the Standing Committee on Health. And today we're going to study the federal framework on Lyme disease. We have three witnesses here with us in the meeting room, and we have, by video conference, a visitor from Sackville, New Brunswick. So I'm going to introduce the witnesses. On behalf of the Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation, Janet Sperling, board member. And then we have, as individuals, Sue Faber, Lyme disease advocate and patient. We also have Jennifer Kravis, Lyme disease advocate and patient, and Dr. Yvette Lloyd, professor at Mount Allison University by video conference. So welcome all, and welcome to Mount Allison. Glad to have you here. Now, I'm going to seek unanimous consent to allow Elizabeth May to make a few opening remarks, because we're here because I believe we could say we're here because of her original bill C-442, which resulted in this framework being established. And so do I have unanimous consent to allow Ms. May to make a statement? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, Elizabeth May, fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all members of the committee. And I will not trespass long on your time because we have people with us that I want you to hear. But I just wanted to set a bit of context. Some of you were in that Parliament, Don certainly, in June 2012 when I first tabled for first reading Bill C-442. We have had tremendous nonpartisan, all-party support from the beginning. The bill was supported in the House of Commons unanimously and went to the Senate, where it was also supported unanimously. And the bill's nuts and bolts required a conference to be held, bringing in medical experts, federal, provincial government health departments, and people from what we now think of as the Lyme disease community. People such as some of the witnesses we have today before us, Sue and Jennifer. I wanted to give you a sense that that conference was an extraordinary success. Our public health officer at the time, Greg Taylor, was very strong in saying we needed to do more. We've been failing our patients. We've been failing people with Lyme disease across Canada. I wanted to briefly say that now that the framework has been published, the committee's work for 2 days this week is very important. And I know you'll hear evidence about how serious Lyme disease is, how fast it's spreading, and frankly, the hell on earth it's been for patients with Lyme disease. One of my constituents went to 18 different specialists before they finally thought, okay, maybe we'll try going to the States, and then finally got some help. The bottom line here, I believe, is that any Canadian experiencing Lyme disease should be able to get treatment in Canada, and we're not there yet. The Minister of Health herself doesn't have a magic wand or the jurisdiction to make it so. But the framework gives us some tools. So I wanted to point us in that direction as the positive work going forward, because in the framework document, in Appendix 1, is the federal action plan. And I wanted to turn your attention to the pieces, particularly under Point 2, education awareness, and Point 3 on guidelines. Both of those sections point us in the direction of finding ways to educate medical professionals. Now, medical professionals are a very educated bunch, and I have the deepest respect for the doctors of this community. In fact, the Canadian Medical Association endorsed Bill C-442, and the letter endorsing it made the point that Lyme disease is an extremely difficult disease to diagnose. And the advice, which I agree with in this framework, is that diagnosis is primarily a clinical diagnosis. In other words, lab tests are quite unreliable no matter where you take them. False positives, false negatives are problems. And what we need is to have every medical doctor in Canada, every family doc, when someone presents with a weird range of symptoms, think to themselves, I wonder if it's Lyme disease. And if I respond quickly and with early treatment, if it is Lyme disease, this person will be restored to full health. But if I delay, thinking, well, maybe it's something else, you can actually end up having the disease become much more serious and last much, much longer. So these two pieces, education and awareness, again, develop a national tick and Lyme disease education and awareness campaign. This is the federal commitment. A campaign in collaboration with partners that addresses recognition of Lyme disease symptoms to assist frontline professionals to perform early diagnosis and treatment, and then under guidelines and best practices in Point 3, work with international public health partners, because, by the way, Lyme disease is spreading very quickly in Europe, and share best practices and disseminate domestically. So these are areas where we don't yet have a clear sense of how we're going to do it. The commitment is there, and it's clear that we can't polarize this issue with good guys and bad guys. That's not appropriate. Everybody here is a good guy. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do, to use the right tools, and to start ensuring that every Canadian who experiences Lyme disease is helped. There are many people who have had it for a very long time, and those particular patients represent a group where the research money will be very, very helpful. We have $4 million for research. That money, I hope, will go to trying to find a vaccine, but also to trying to find ways to help people who have what's either variously described as post-Lyme syndrome or chronic Lyme. And I don't want to get involved on that ideological divide. I just know there's a lot of people in wheelchairs who need help. So I've taken longer than I actually told you, Mr. Chair, I would. You said I could have 5 minutes. I said I wouldn't need that. But at 4 minutes and 43 seconds, I will stop. And thank you for your attention.
Well, you had 14 seconds to go, so anyway, thank you very much, and we're all grateful to you for bringing this on. And, you know, public awareness is a big part of this. And as I mentioned a minute ago, I was watching CBC News this morning, and they had a considerable argument or article on Lyme disease. And a mayor in Nova Scotia is calling for help on this. They feel it's getting to a very dangerous level. So I think our timing is excellent, and so we're going to start our presentations with Mr. Sperling. If you each one will have 10 minutes as an opening statement. I hold the flag up at 9 minutes, so you can start, Ms. Sperling, on making your 10 minutes presentation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that speaking as a patient advocate, I'm not going to read my brief because I really want to speak from the heart here. On behalf of people who have Lyme disease and the people who end up looking after the people who have Lyme disease, we're really concerned that the framework at this point doesn't have enough patient representation. And our expertise is really with looking after these people who are very, very sick. So we have some concerns on all three of the pillars. And just as an example with surveillance, when I looked at the case definition, I was going through and looking at it and saying, you know, this is looking pretty good, and it's sure looking a lot better than it used to look. And then I got to the end, and I realized we only had 9 provinces. So the way we undertake the surveillance is going to make a very big difference as to what we see when we come out at the other end. We really need to have patient advocates, you know, pointing out some of these things that are really important, because it does depend on where you are in Canada. And as far as the education and awareness, it needs to be locally adapted. And as an example, in coastal BC, you run into the Lyme disease tick generally in the wet winter months. And it's exactly the opposite in Ontario. So we need to have recognition that Canada is a very big country, and it is different from one end of the country to the other. And when we have this sort of standardized education, it's very important that we don't just rely on the IDSA guidelines, that we need to make sure that Lyme disease as it exists in Nova Scotia is recognized, and I don't actually expect it to be exactly the same by the time we get to BC. So for the patients, and I think the most important thing for the patients is this idea that the IDSA guidelines made no attempt to apply themselves to Canada. They're looking at it from a very different perspective. So we need to recognize that across the country we have variants of Lyme disease. And the IDSA guidelines right now are confusing what's called surveillance criteria with actually diagnosing the patients. So surveillance criteria are very important, and those are the ones that need to be standardized. But the actual treatment of the patient, the diagnosis of the patient, doesn't have to rely on surveillance criteria. The guidelines, the IDSA guidelines, do fail to recognize a lot of research that shows that there is persistent infection. And yet, I mean, I do want to point out on the plus side, the really important part is it does recognize that the Government of Canada has a very important role to play. So the problem I see now with the National Research Network is that it stresses that you're going to consult with the provincial and territorial health regulatory authorities. But unfortunately, these are the people who have a history of minimizing Lyme disease. If you're not going to include the patients as equal partners, I see a problem here. We know that early cases of Lyme disease continue to be missed because often doctors haven't understood that you can't take the serological result, especially early in the disease. So we know that we have a lag time, and we're going to continue to have new cases of Lyme disease. So I'd like to quote a Canadian doctor and a professor when he says that historical precedence repeatedly illustrates the diversity of thought and opinion, dissonance with the status quo, and openness to exploring new ideas are what moves medicine forward. So that's Dr. Stephen Genuis. And the Lyme Disease Network right now appears to be set up by restricting to the status quo. And science is the best tool that we have. There's no question that we have to use the very best science we have, and yet the guidelines are missing large chunks of science. So if we rely on the same Lyme authorities that landed us in this situation, without inviting divergent opinions to the table, it's going to delay a Canadian solution to a Canadian problem that's continuing to get bigger. Now, the infectious diseases doctors are tasked with reducing the use of antibiotics, and rightly so. There's no question there. But this does very little to support the family doctors who are left with very sick patients. So I'd like to close just by giving two very recent examples. One of them was last Friday, and the other one was as I was getting ready to come to the airport. So last Friday, I was walking down the hall, and one of the building maintenance people stopped, and I said, "How did it go? You went to the doctor, and how did it go?" And he says, "I'm afraid that the doctor looked at his girlfriend, who has a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and said they would not make a referral to one of our highly respected Lyme-literate medical doctors. And the basis of the refusal to send this very sick person for an opinion that perhaps this could be a clinical case of Lyme disease is that Lyme disease is a fad illness." So what happened was, the end result is this very sick patient was sent home with a physician-prescribed fentanyl. So the poor lady is sitting on the couch, she's unable to work, she's in unbearable pain, and the response was to give her fentanyl. So the second story, which is on Monday, is a dear friend of mine who got Lyme disease in 2008 in Germany. She got a positive first tier when she came back to Canada, and that was a positive C6 peptide, but they did a Western blot for the Lyme disease you'd get in the United States, and she didn't get a positive there. So she was considered wholly negative. But now her family doctor was listening to all this information about the Lyme disease research and the framework, and he said, "Great, I'm going to phone up, I'm going to make an appointment for you to see the infectious diseases doctor because you're a classic case of somebody who's been missed." And she was refused the appointment with infectious diseases because she doesn't have two-tier positive serology. So these people really need to be dealt with very differently. And the rigid system that won't even see the patients unless they have two-tier positive serology risks now being rewarded with more funding. And if the funding is going to go to the same people, then the treatment isn't going to be any different. And the same people who have denied the consideration of Lyme disease are the people where the research funding seems to be flowing. So at best, this framework is a baby step in the right direction, but it risks cementing in place the same rigid structure that failed patients for the past decades. So thank you.
And thank you very much, and we appreciate your focus on the framework in your remarks as well. So now we'll move to Ms. Faber for 10 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sue Faber, and I'm a registered nurse by profession, with a majority of my experience as an ER nurse. I'm a Lyme sufferer, advocate, and married mother of 3 daughters who also have Lyme. My husband Andrew has been my rock and has focused me on this unrelenting, exhausting, and often overwhelming journey, which feels to me like mission impossible. My personal Christian faith is my anchor, and my belief that God often chooses to use the weak and weary to accomplish his purposes, to reveal his power in the midst of what feels like a continuous, raging storm. I'm calling on each of you here today to lace up your sturdiest pair of well-worn hiking boots and join me as I take the lead for just a few moments as your guide. What qualifies to speak to you today isn't a PhD or a position of authority. Rather, my qualifications come from a personal journey into the hazy, suffocating shadows of what I would like to call the Lyme lands, where those affected by the same plight must band together and unite to very survive. We are the weary, the wounded, and the sick. We find each other as we have no choice but to look to answers together. We share an illness which is insidious, disabling, and destructive, a disease which comes like a thief in the night to snatch away childhoods and steal careers, a disease which cripples active, contributory Canadians, bankrupts families, and breaks down marriages, a disease which in some cases has driven Canadians to end their own lives. I ask you to take the time to read the 3 Lyme letters which I have been given permission to share in my brief, to give you a clear and disturbing picture of the reality of suffering of Canadian adults and children alike. Jennifer and I have been brought to tears as we receive regular phone calls and as we read letters which we received through the Lyme Letters campaign, which I started back in January of this year, and we now have over 2,500 letters. Letters which I am waiting to hand deliver to Minister Philpott, and I truly trust that she will open her doors to receive them very soon. And I believe I see Jordan Crosby here today from the minister's office, and I really hope that he will reach out to me and that we can make these arrangements for these letters to be passed to Minister Philpott and for us to speak to them personally. Parents are horrified and panicked as they watch their child's health disintegrate in front of their eyes, writhing in pain, collapsing on the floor, screaming that their brain is on fire, having paralyzed limbs, bizarre rashes. And when they take their child to an infectious disease doctor with positive Lyme tests from the US or even Europe, these patients are flat out told they are wasting their time and energy on garbage tests. Some families have been messaged that their precious children are being accused of faking or even self-inflicting symptoms. We have heard of an infectious disease doctor recently demanding a child to get out of their wheelchair and walk, despite their legs buckling beneath them. Parents being pressured to commit their sons and daughters to psych wards. Parents being threatened that they are painting their children with the same paintbrush, insinuating a Munchausen's by proxy mental illness. Parents are being forced to do their own research, sell their possessions to cover the cost of flying their disabled child to expert clinicians outside Canadian borders. What happens to the families who don't have the money and who don't have the resources? The reality is these children indeed are treatable. They have a multisystemic infectious illness triggering an autoimmune encephalopathy. With appropriate, prolonged treatment, which often involves multiple antibiotics as well as other therapies, these children can regain their lives and their hope. Many parents across Canada believe their children contracted Lyme disease through pregnancy, and I am one of those parents. I will never forget the day I just so happened upon an article on gestational Lyme disease. I had just been diagnosed myself with chronic Lyme in Canada, and as I read this particular report, I was shocked. Did this mean that Lyme disease could indeed be passed from an unsuspecting mother to her unborn child? This particular case report listed a diversity of clinical manifestations of congenital babies, and I started completing a mental checkbox for each of my daughters. It all started to make sense, and my gut instinct compelled me to get my children tested. All 3 girls, Lyme Western blots, came back positive from a lab in the US with undeniable evidence of exposure to Lyme. It made perfect sense to me. All three of my children had been sick since birth with all kinds of unknown ailments that were cyclical in nature: fevers, joint pain, headaches, rashes, abdominal pain, vomiting, anxiety, OCD. I was an emergency room nurse, and I didn't know what to do. And the doctors kept saying, "We don't know what it is, but just keep plugging along. You're a good mother." Later on, one of my daughters actually tested positive here in Canada using our 2-tier serology for a European strain. Funny enough, she never traveled to Europe. I also tested positive for a European strain. And members, I want to say to you today that I had to lie on the public health requisition to get her tested for the European strain, because the only way they would test her blood is if she had recent travel history to an endemic part of Europe. And guess what? It was positive. I'll never forget the day that I shared my daughter's positive Canadian serology results with my ID doctor, my infectious disease doctor, and I looked at her straight in the eye and asked her about congenital transmission. She said she knew about case studies on maternal transmission, but she wasn't an expert in the area. She went on to tell me in her words, "I certainly admire the fight you have done on behalf of your kids. You are doing the right thing. And you contradict everything that people have been taught. And so where's the reality? I don't know." To this day, I'm completely disgusted and frankly outraged that despite diagnosing me with chronic Lyme in Canada, this expert, whom other physicians look to as an authority in Lyme disease, had been coldly silent to making me aware of the possibility of mother-to-child transmission. I had to figure it out all by myself without any support from any Canadian physician. There was a very recent CBC radio interview with Dr. Carolyn Quack, who is the president of the Infectious Disease AMI of Canada. Dr. Quack was interviewed as an expert in the subject matter and was asked this question directly by the radio host: "Can Lyme disease be transmitted in the womb?" Her response was, I quote, "There's no evidence that this is actually happening, and hasn't been any evidence in humans that this has happened, at least not reported in the literature." So she flat out denied evidence of congenital Lyme transmission. She was speaking out as an expert, and thus her words would hold considerable weight and be seen as trustworthy and an authoritative source of information by her medical colleagues. I ask you, honorable members of this committee, does this not disturb you as it does me? Denial of truth cannot be accepted or tolerated. Not in the past, not in the present, and certainly not in the future. This denial must stop now, and it is clear to me that when it comes to Lyme disease, infectious disease doctors have an alternate agenda which must be examined. They have clear biases which must be questioned. They must be held accountable for their actions. My story gets more disturbing because when I reached out to my local public health unit to discuss my concerns of congenital transmission, instead of being granted a face-to-face meeting, I was mailed a letter which stated that both myself and my daughter would not be counted or reported as positive Lyme cases in Canada. You see, we presented a rather inconvenient truth to our public health authority. And so instead of acknowledging and engaging, they dismissed, denied, and erased us from the record. So just to reiterate, the number of positive Lyme cases in 2016 did not include myself or my daughter, for reasons which escape my comprehension, without any meaningful rationale, and certainly in my mind, completely unethical behavior. I was also told in the same public health letter that there was no scientific evidence of congenital transmission. So not only the AMMI denying the reality, but also our public health authority. Could it be that the infectious disease doctors in public health who take a lead on this illness deny the very existence of scientific research that contradicts their rigid dogma? Yesterday, Jennifer and I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. New, Deputy Chief Public Health Officer. We asked Dr. New why congenital Lyme transmission had not been mentioned in the federal framework, considering the available body of scientific literature and evidence, including pathology reports, case studies, and an entire chapter written and dedicated in a reference medical textbook, which I have brought with me today. It is quite disturbing that this textbook is no longer available as a reference resource, and in fact, Jennifer and I had to find it through used book dealers on Amazon. And I will be leaving a copy of this edition with the committee clerk today, and I ask that this textbook be available to the committee and anyone else who would want to learn about the devastating reality. And I hope this textbook will permanently be archived as clear evidence to what I have shared with you today. I also asked Dr. New why Public Health had not made mention to the June 4th, 1988 Canada Diseases Weekly Report, which is included in your brief, which states, in quotes, transplacental transmission of B. Burgdorferi has been documented and may be associated with an increased risk of adverse pregnancy outcome. Why has nothing been done in 29 years to address this concern? No Canadian research, no further mention, nothing. Our public health officials are fully aware of this information, and yet they choose not to share it, and in their silence, they are allowing more children to become infected. I have more to say, but I'm going to close because I realize my time is up. Thank you for joining me on this uphill battle. We are still far from the top. I know we must climb to the top because the pinnacle of this mountain, we will experience a freedom and be able to clearly see the truth. Climbing to the top can only be accomplished by reliance and trust of those who climbed this mountain, the patients. They and only they can speak to their journey with clarity and insight. It is devastating that this strong and authoritative voice was completely left out of the federal Lyme framework. In fact, the voices, testimonies, and pleas of thousands upon thousands of Canadians was clearly blacked out, shut out, and in essence, ignored. Despite this failed framework, I still have great hope that this isn't the end of the story, but rather the start of a fresh beginning, a reawakening to the reality of the Lyme crisis which continues to sweep across our nation. Your decisions and actions on this issue will directly impact the fate of millions of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Ms. Kravis. 10 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Kravis. I live in Oakville, Ontario. Thank you for having me here today. I used to be a lawyer and a bank executive, but 11 years ago at age 36, I was suddenly debilitated and bedridden by a mystery disease that took me hundreds of thousands of dollars in 5 years to determine was Lyme disease. I had to go to the US, pay even more money, and I spent 2 years getting continuous antibiotic treatment, including a PICC line, which gave me my quality of life back and my family's as well. I still cannot work, but I advocate for Lyme disease now. There are 5 people in my family with Lyme, and my dog has it as well. But my dog was treated promptly with compassionate and care, and he got 5 months of antibiotics, and he made a full recovery. And my niece got early treatment after seeing 4 doctors with a bullseye rash. And the rest of us, myself, my mother, and my 2 daughters, we are permanently affected. And as a mother, I live with the guilt and horror of discovering I probably infected my 2 kids. They both have chronic Lyme and multiple co-infections, and one has encephalitis causing neuropsych issues and arthritis in the spine, and she's 14 years old. In the last week, I've spent many hours thinking, what could I possibly say to you in 10 minutes to convey to you the suffering, the despair, the abuse, the financial ruin that is sweeping this country? I could talk about my full story. I was financially secure, a Bay Street professional. I had money, connections, and access to the very best health care, but it did not protect me and my family, and it will not protect you. I could talk about the 40,000 Canadians who signed our petition, or wrote thousands of Lyme letters from Minister Philpott, letters that bring us to tears on a regular basis. But Thursday, you will be told the petition comments are really about ticks, and stories are anecdotes, not evidence. I could talk about the independent professional benchmark survey we did in Canada to ask how many people are affected by Lyme disease. The survey asked, have you or someone you know in Canada been diagnosed with Lyme disease? And the answer is between 2.8 and 5 million people. Public health numbers are a joke because people are denied testing and not counted. People get false negative results and they are not counted. People get positive results. They're told that they're false and they're not counted. People get positive tests from international labs and they are not counted. And finally, those who by some miracle know about Lyme, convince their doctor to order tests, pass the first tier, pass the second tier, prove they were in an endemic area, get to the doctor in time, get a bullseye rash, have the doctor visually inspect the bullseye rash. Even a majority of those cases are not counted. Just like Sue Faber talked about. I thought about asking questions like, why has public health ignored 35 published peer-reviewed tick studies by an Ontario researcher named John Scott, who has compiled over the last 27 years? Why has public health not warned First Nations they are living in hyper-endemic areas like Kenora, Ontario, where John Scott estimates ticks have been established for 50 years? Why have our doctors never heard of co-infections? My 13-year-old daughter has Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and this is a disease that can be fatal in up to 75% of untreated cases. I had to fight for this test, and when it came back positive, my GP fired us. This leaves me going back to my original question, which is, what could I possibly say to you to convince you something tragic, shocking, and disturbing is happening in plain sight? I decided I would speak about the truth, the real truth. The truth that nobody wants to talk about or believe, but the truth is the bill was great, but the final framework is useless. It is inaccurate. It's going to cause harm to Canadians. And the process was mangled by some powerful, unethical, and self-serving interests. The truth is we have a massive global pandemic, one that is not easily prevented by pulling your socks up and staying in the middle of the paths. The truth is people are so desperate to get life-saving antibiotics, they beg their vets and they beg their doctors to try and get 6 weeks of antibiotics in a desperate attempt to avoid lifelong disability. And the truth is there's a secret network of Canadian doctors who risk their licenses to treat their patients. And the truth is Lyme patients are horribly abused by doctors, but if they file a complaint to the college, they are harassed and blacklisted. And the truth is millions of Canadians, including First Nations and children, are walking around with the wrong diagnosis. The truth is, U.S. doctors are getting paid by us to learn about this disease instead of our own doctors gaining this knowledge and expertise. And the truth is, we have thousands of parents who live in agony and despair, hiding in their homes with sick, disabled children who scream and cry, have seizures, are in horrific pain. The truth is, people with bullseye rashes in every province, every day, are being turned away and denied treatment, sent home to wind up disabled in excruciating, unrelenting pain. Some doctors say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. I will get in trouble, and I have to protect my family over yours." And some doctors say, "I'm not allowed to help you, but if you go to the U.S. and get treatment, you will get better." And many doctors say, "I guarantee you don't have Lyme disease." And in fact, they are correct because the system at every stage guarantees it's virtually impossible to get a Lyme diagnosis. When the Canadian test is negative, it is called gold standard. When the test is positive, it is called false. And when the test is from an out-of-country, it is called garbage, except if it's negative. The truth is surveillance is a sham and a waste of money because ticks are dropped everywhere by migrating birds, and surveillance is not progress. It is a tool used to deny the disease. And the truth is some people don't get their Lyme test back from the national lab for months, and too many people are told their test results are lost. The newest weapon in the Lyme war is antimicrobial resistance, which denies very sick Lyme people life-saving treatment or the dangerous side effects of antibiotics. But the truth is people with arthritis, syphilis, Crohn's disease, tuberculosis, relapsing fever, rheumatic heart fever, rosacea, MS, and acne are given months and years of antibiotics without hesitation. And cancer patients are given the choice of drugs with side effects so dangerous they can kill them. Let's review the so-called facts of Lyme disease that we are told by Public Health and Infectious Disease. Number 1, our testing is fine. Number 2, ticks must be attached for 24 to 48 hours to transmit disease. Number 3, only black-legged ticks carry Lyme. Number 4, your risk of contracting Lyme is very low, so don't worry, and virtually zero outside of endemic areas. Number 5, you can't have Lyme if you don't get a bullseye rash. Number 6, 2 or 3 weeks of one antibiotic is all you need to be fully cured. And if you have any new lingering symptoms, you have a new disease, which is called post-Lyme treatment disease syndrome, which looks and feels exactly the same as the infectious disease you just had 3 weeks earlier. 8, we are told there's no scientific evidence of persistent infection or that long-term antibiotics help. We are told there is no scientific evidence of congenital transmission. We are told we don't know what all these people have, but it's not Lyme. And we're told that people fixating on Lyme could miss the chance to get a real diagnosis. And finally, we are told other countries' tests, all of them, are unvalidated from for-profit labs, not FDA approved, purchased positives, garbage, or run by profiteers and quacks. But the truth is every single one of those sentences is untrue. The truth is doctors are being misled, patients are being misled, and the public is being misled. And we need you to do what no one has been able to do despite fighting for decades. Not advocates, not Bill 442, not celebrities, politicians, journalists, not even an international organization of medical doctors and scientists. We need you to ask yourself, does it make sense that tens of thousands of Canadians have a shared delusion about their own health and welfare, their body and their symptoms? That tens of thousands of kids who've never met are suffering from a shared psychiatric disease that causes them to fake symptoms? That previously rational, healthy adults are conspiring to obtain antibiotics, which, if abused, give you a stomachache and a sunburn? Does it make sense that desperately sick people bankrupt themselves for treatments that provide no relief to them? We need you to ask the questions that always reveal the truth. Who benefits? Who benefits or profits from the denial and suppression of these diseases? Who benefits from patients missing the early cure with a cheap generic antibiotic and wind up labeled with fibromyalgia or an incurable neurodegenerative disease like MS, ALS, or Alzheimer's? It's not patients. It's not taxpayers. It's not families, kids. It's not businesses. It's not our healthcare budget. It's not family doctors or clinicians, and it's not our economy. The truth is, it is too late for me and my family because there is no amount of money, drugs, connections, or treatments that will restore our health. We are here for you. We are here for all those Canadians who are so sick and in pain and feel abandoned and on the verge of suicide. We are here for all those Canadians who will be unknowingly struck down in their parks and their backyards. And we are here because we cannot bear to hear one more story of a child with a bullseye rash being sent away to end up disabled. And the truth is, Canadians desperately need you to stand up and do the right thing. We need your help. Please help. Thank you.
And thank you. Now we go to Dr. Lloyd.
Well, good morning. So I'm going to, again, I do have notes, but I won't necessarily read from them. I want to provide a bit of context about where I'm coming from. I have had Lyme and, like many others, had to seek treatment in the United States to return to health. But in this case, I'm speaking as a scientist, and I'm going to focus on the science of the Lyme disease framework. And I apologize for the people who are now thinking, got to sit through 9.5 more minutes of science, but I'll keep the science part light. So, as has already been mentioned, my feeling reading the framework document, also being on the conference planning committee and presenting at the conference, was that this framework fails to provide the leadership that the scientific community needs, that the medical community needs, and it completely fails patients. And I'm going to go through the reasons why I'm saying that. The first reason is that the framework doesn't have a place for the patient voice. The patient voice did show up at the conference, and it was a spectacular conference. It was the first time we had brought together patients, scientists, and the medical profession. And all the voices were heard, and they were heard. There were difficult conversations, but they were respectful conversations. And I felt we were making progress. And unfortunately, none of that material ended up in either the draft or the final framework, which the two are fairly similar with some window dressing. So without the voice of the patients, we don't know what's important, and anything going forward will be more or less meaningless. There's too much of a disconnect between the people who need this framework and the way the framework currently exists. I would also point out that having the patient front and center is intrinsic in the ethical guidelines for both medicine and science, and this framework fails to meet either scientific or medical ethical guidelines. I'm going to talk briefly about science and the framework. The term evidence-based is tossed about quite liberally in the framework, but it is misused. What evidence or science-based means is not that someone somewhere has done a study where you like the results and they're convenient results, and then you just declare that to be correct. It means that you take all the relevant peer-reviewed literature and you ask, does it all say the same thing? And if it doesn't say the same thing, you have to figure out why. But you don't just ignore the stuff you don't like. That's the antithesis of science. And there's been an enormous history of cherry picking within the whole development and management of Lyme disease in Canada, and we've heard stories of that, so I won't go into that. But it feeds into every aspect of the problem, from how long it takes a tick to transmit the disease to whether or not long-term antibiotics will work and help the patient or not. Really, we have to do better with science. It's really the only tool we have, and we have to do proper science. And that also means ethical science. I've got a list of science glitches, errors in this document, and I'm not going to go through it because lists are boring. But I will point out that the first sentence of the document is factually incorrect, and so is the second, and that really isn't a good start. The first figure features the dots of doom that everyone agreed in the surveillance section at the conference. That was the one section where people achieved consensus. There was consensus that that was not a good way to represent data, and there it shows up in the framework. The real problem from my perspective is that the partners that are named as the people who will work together to bring this framework into action, to bring out its potential, include a number of partners, including partners who have no research capacity, and it excludes, and I do not know why it excludes, but it excludes the two federal funding agencies, the NSERC and SSHRC, that regulate and fund research in the natural sciences, which is critical for a disease that's transferred via ticks from wildlife, and leaves out the Social Sciences Research Council, which is critical because we're looking at what this disease does to people, what it costs the healthcare system, what it does to communities. And I do not understand why scientists were excluded from this document. And a corollary of scientists being excluded is that $4 million will now not be available for science. I'm going to talk briefly about non-transparency. The framework, how the framework was assembled was non-transparent. The conference was transparent, but it was not used to inform the final framework document. In addition to being non-transparent, essentially, people went away and 9 months later, the just stated document sprang into being. There was privileged access by the AMBI membership of the Planning Committee, and that was documented apparently by the AMBI member of the committee, apparently unaware that other members did not have access to the document, but some people were allowed to see the draft document and comment on it, but certainly the patient groups were not, and the science people, as far as I know, were not. And that it's disturbing to have preferential input into a controversial issue where there are divergent opinions. We need to pull together, we need to accept that there are divergent opinions and talk to each other, not privilege one side or the other. And that is seen in the fact that the document specifically endorses one of the two treatment guidelines available for Canadian patients, but not the other. And in fact, it does not endorse the more recent one and the one with stronger scientific evaluations. It's also not clear to me that why a policy document is dictating patient treatment modalities, because really that should be determined by the physician who has actually examined the patient. Funding is also equally non-transparent, and we can see that in the fact that the funding priorities that are picked out are not the priorities that are important to the patient groups. I don't know where they came from. They did not come from the conference. They just appeared. All the issues that are important to Canadians, we've mentioned some in terms of congenital transmission, sexual transmission. Are there other vectors out there? Is our blood supply safe? These are very important issues. They're not addressed, and I don't know what happened to them. And I guess just to emphasize the importance of doing good science is Friday of last week, there was an announcement that they had found that for multiple sclerosis patients, long-term antibiotic treatment was in fact reducing by half the number of patients who showed disease progression. So all of a sudden, when you start treating up multiple sclerosis patients with treatment that would be appropriate for Lyme disease, you're seeing an improvement. So that's really frightening. People will die of multiple sclerosis. I think that emphasizes how important it is to get this right. There are Canadians dying of this disease when it's not recognized. So I'm coming to the end. What I've ended up with was, I'm a scientist, as my supervisors are keen to saying, is that no scientist should be allowed outside unescorted. So I'm going to I ended with questions that I don't have an answer to, and perhaps there is expertise in this room. Is it appropriate when drafting a framework to give some members of some experts, but not other experts, and certainly not the patients, access to directing the framework? With the document, it's essentially written so that it'll be reviewed in 5 years. But in this field, the knowledge of science doubles in slightly under 2 years. So what we're left with is a document which you may feel is excellent or you may feel is terrible. I'm in the latter camp. But it will be even more out of date in another 2 years. Is there a way to make this a living document? And the references within the framework that the Public Health Agency of Canada will continue checking diagnostics is not part of being a living document. That's their mandate, to be continually staying up to date. So is there a way to have input into this document moving forward? Ideally patient input, and definitely science input. I'm unclear about whether it's appropriate for policy to be dictating patient treatment guidelines. That seems a dangerous thing for a high-level document like this to be doing. And my final point is just to emphasize that the ethical guidelines in both science and medicine state very clearly that the patient must be not just consulted. Consulted can mean anything from, oh, this is what we've decided to do. You good with that? Sign here. It means that the patients must be equal partners. They must be asked, what's important to you? How are we going to get there? Patients are not just fodder for being fed into science studies, and they're not just, here, take this treatment and go away and be grateful that you got it. We have to talk to Canadians who have this illness, and we have to help people. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for all of our witnesses, and thank you for the emotion and the emotional aspect that you bring to make it real for us. But we're going to go to questions now, and we should try to keep it on the framework if we can, on how we can improve the framework, or what's good about it, what's bad about it. And so, Mr. Oliver.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to all of you for very powerful personal testimony. And I know that you're not just representing yourselves, you're representing a large number of Lyme disease, people with Lyme disease across Canada. And I did want to thank you for your advocacy. And the work you've done has been great, from your advocacy that got the federal framework on Lyme Disease Act in place, and the assistance that my colleague, Ms. May, brought to that. That resulted in the draft framework, and I know there's been a lot of advocacy and consultation in the improving the draft framework. So I really did want to thank you and recognize that. So as I listen to your testimony, I'm trying to figure out how do we that we have a meeting on Thursday with some of the people from Health Canada and others who were part of the framework design. How do we best talk and reference with them? So I did hear in your testimony something about the current state of both recognition, surveillance, and treatment of Lyme disease in Canada, but some of that is actually what the framework is intended to do, and I think we need to get the framework rolled out to address those issues. So the 3 pillars of surveillance, education and awareness, and guidelines and best practices would address some of the concerns that I heard, particularly around primary care treatment and recognition of the disease and best treatment protocols. And then there were in the listening stage between the draft and the final framework, there were 4 key areas that were amended based on your advocacy and your feedback. So one is research funding. So $4 million for the Lyme Disease Research Network, addressed through the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And Dr. Lloyd, you and I may differ in this, but I have a great respect for for CIHR and their evidence-based science peer review approach to these. And that is looking specifically at improving diagnosis and treatment. So a big step forward is research funding. The recognition that there are chronic symptoms, and I know there's still a tension between recognition of chronic symptoms versus recognition of chronic Lyme disease as a case type, and it identifies that research is needed yet to determine that. Improving health lab networks. I think everybody's in agreement there needs to be better lab testing, and I think all of our witnesses spoke to the need for better and more exact testing. And then finally, migratory animals and recognition that migratory animals can carry Lyme, which I think Jennifer, you specifically mentioned as well. So from there, I guess the easiest way for me is I have to ask questions, and I only have 7 minutes. What would you want me to ask the people that are coming on Thursday to make sure that they hear your concerns, and that if we are able in any way as a committee to improve the framework or make suggestions, how do we do that? So I have some down, so I don't want to repeat them. So I have what happened to Dr. John Scott's research? Why wasn't it used? Why wasn't it referenced? So I have that question. I have congenital transmission. Is it true? Is it not? Why is it not referenced and spoken to directly? I have funding priorities. Who set the funding priorities? Are they based on evidence and science? And I also then have a question around the patient voice. Why is the patient voice silent in the framework? And how would the authors think that the patient voice would be best drawn into it? So that's what I have so far. Those are my 4 questions from your testimony. What else would you like me to, or any of the committee members to ask on Thursday that would further, in your minds, improve the framework?
One suggestion would be to ask the 2 clinicians that are attending about the different testing modalities that are already available and in existence that could significantly improve the sensitivity of the test, and also perhaps a perspective on...
So that's lab testing?
Lab testing, yes. And also a perspective on how do we get from here to where we need to be, which is for all medical professionals across Canada to understand the realities of this disease and how to recognize it, diagnose it, and treat it.
Okay. So just to be clear, in the revised framework, there is specific reference to the need to improve the lab testing, the lab work that's being done, and the 3 pillars are already include education and awareness. So those, I think, I understand you're dealing with the frustration of the terrible environment that's been here, and we need to think about what will the environment look like post-implementation of the framework that actually addresses those issues. So any other questions I'd ask that aren't addressed in the framework and the revised framework?
Yeah, I'd like to see something about how the doctors who are good at making the clinical diagnosis, why aren't they being approached and to explain how they make that diagnosis? Because they seem to be pretty accurate. With or without the blood test, they seem to be very good at identifying the people who will respond to the treatment. So I think that that's a big area that maybe for the next 5 years we're going to say, maybe we have to admit that the blood test doesn't work. But for the next 5 years, we're going to go with a clinical diagnosis, and then we're going to revisit it after that. So I'd like to see more emphasis on the clinical diagnosis.
So just to be clear on that, so my understanding is the current testing, it requires antibodies or a change in your blood system in response to the Lyme disease before it appears. So you have a problem with treatment based on symptoms presented in a doctor's office, and the classic one being the bullseye ring rash, versus having to wait for the antibodies, I guess, to appear in a blood test, and that can take. Are there lab tests in the U.S. or elsewhere that are more fast or are able to better detect Lyme earlier than what we have?
I think the reason most people send to the U.S. is that if you get the first tier positive, it then goes to your second tier positive. But the Americans will give you the banding pattern. So there's supposed to be 5 out of 10 bands have to be positive. But that already exists at the national lab. They already know if it's positive, which one of those 5 is positive. So a really quick thing to do would be to release that to the family doctor and say this individual maybe only had 4 of 10. But if we know, for example, that person lives in BC and they got 4 out of 10 and they're sick, then maybe for that individual it's worth trying the treatment. So that would be a really quick way to deal with it, is to release all the information that they have. And I believe even now they've stopped giving the C6 positive. So now in order to get the word positive, you have to be positive for the C6 and for the Western blot. Whereas if you said, okay, positive for C6, that's one piece of information, positive for the Western blot and the particular banding pattern.
Thank you. Sue or Dr. Lloyd, anything you'd like, any other direct questions? Yep.
I would like to have a specific question to find out why it was that NSERC and SSHRC are not included as partners. I completely agree with you with CIHR as a wonderful partner. However, their mandate is only a small part of this problem, and by not having the natural scientists and the social scientists as partners, we're losing a lot of expertise, which is present in Canada.
Okay, thank you again for your testimony. Thank you.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you witnesses as well for coming today. I'll get a quick question here. The conference that was a year ago here in, I think it was here in Ottawa, did you attend? I have a quick question. Jennifer, did you attend that conference? Sue?
I didn't, no.
Okay, Janet?
Yes.
And Dr. Lloyd?
Yes.
You attended this conference. Okay, now, during this conference, of course, many issues were brought up, and that's what developed the framework that we have here in front of us today. And my question is then, was the issue of congenital transmission raised during this consultation period, this conference? Was it raised?
Yes.
It was brought up? You talked about it? Was the issue of transmission through blood, was that talked about and discussed at this conference?
It was
Yes.
certainly raised as an issue.
What about Lyme disease vaccines? Were vaccines discussed, talked about? Okay, well,
Yes.
that's disappointing because I don't see it in this document, this framework, other than on page 31, a brief bullet point talking about the research, human-to-human transmission, congenital breast milk, sexual, blood supply, organ donation. To me, that is quite disappointing because this is a major public health concern. So I guess what I'd like to ask, Dr. Lloyd, is your scientific background. Do you believe that there can be human-to-human transmission of Lyme through the blood supply, for one?
Well, I'll answer that indirectly. When we do work with mice, the way we inoculate the mice, the way we produce infected mice is we inoculate them with blood, usually from another mouse. So that's mice, not humans, but we've all got blood and it works the same way. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why it would not happen. There's documentation in the literature saying it does happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
so, yes.
Yes, I believe so as well from the discussions I've had in the past with scientists and doctors and such, but we aren't doing any screening here in our blood supply, and this is certainly going to be a question I'm going to ask on Thursday with Canadian Blood Services. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Now, also, with regard to, infected mothers passing on Lyme disease to their children, I've got some notes here. It is a travesty, and I'm very sorry to hear that it has occurred in both yours, Sue, and Jennifer's families. And I understand that there is no science to prove that it is sexually transmitted. And perhaps I'll ask this as well, Dr. Lloyd. Can Lyme disease or any of its other sort of
Relatives?
types of relatives, can it be transmitted through sexual activity?
There is science to say it can be found in human genital secretions. It has been shown to be sexually transmitted in a number of different animals, dogs, horses for some reason, cats and mice. There are also studies which failed to document it. But I think at this point, the precautionary principle would be to say, yes, we can see it happens in humans. It looks like it could happen in, we can see it happening in animals. It looks like it could happen in humans. So, yeah, let's not take a risk.
Absolutely. It's certainly something I will bring up with Canadian Blood Services. I think it's a concerning issue, and we need to address this. A question that I have is, I go out into the mountains with my grandkids, my future grandkids, and they get bit by a tick. Are you saying then that the treatment is going to be difficult for me then to go to a doctor to say, look, my child's been bit by a tick? What do I do now? Is there treatment for my grandchild? Your experience, Jennifer and Sue, sounds to me like the treatment does not work well here in Canada. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Actually, if you have a child or a grandchild who does get bitten by a tick, there is treatment, and the key is it needs to be early treatment. So that child needs to go to that emergency room or to that family doctor, and whether or not they have a tick attachment still on them or not doesn't matter. The point is that child has been bitten. They may or may not have a rash. But we need to treat those children. We cannot watch and wait. We cannot.
So it's the diagnosis first.
It's the diagnosis. So our clinicians must be aware of, and there are guidelines set out, currently available to our clinicians, which set out proper treatment of these, for individuals, whether it's a child or an adult. The problem is many times, from many stories we have heard, children are actually presenting to an emergency room with a classic EM rash. And by the way, an EM rash does not have to be a bullseye. It doesn't have to look like a perfect target. And these children are presenting, and the doctor's saying, well, did you pick off a tick? No. Well, let's just watch and wait. And that watching and waiting could make the difference between that child being completely cured or suffering potentially lifelong chronic illness.
So you watch and wait, and you end up with advanced form of Lyme disease, such as the both of you have. There is no treatment here in Canada for it, obviously. You're seeking treatment outside of Canada, to the U.S., Jennifer, you had mentioned. Why do we not have treatment here? Why can we not develop treatment here like they do in the States?
Well, the drugs are available. The treatment that's typically used by doctors who specialize in this field are multiple types of antibiotics, sometimes often used in combination. And I think there's two reasons. One is that doctors have not been educated on the existence of treatment guidelines which explain how to treat an infection that can be persistent and disseminated. And as well, many doctors feel like they can't. They are concerned that they will be stigmatized, harassed, or sanctioned if they go past the current guideline of 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics.
Can I give an example of that? So I tested positive, 2-tier positive in Canada. My infectious disease doctor did treat me with IV antibiotics for a set period of time. And when that time period was up, she declared me cured. And within 6 weeks of my curative treatment, I developed new symptoms that were actually worse than before, including my tongue going completely numb at the tip, fingers, and toes. I went back to her and said, I'm developing new symptoms. This feels to me like I'm starting to deal with like ALS-type symptoms. And her response to me was, well, I can't treat you any further because the guidelines say I can't. And so she denied me further treatment and suggested I go to a neurologist. I then went to a neurologist who said, you don't have ALS, I can't help you. Perhaps you should go to an infectious disease doctor. And so unfortunately, the door has been closed for my further treatment. I am currently on antibiotics, oral antibiotics, and I can tell you that on this treatment, I am able to be here today. If I was off this treatment, I would be bedridden. But unfortunately, this treatment has not been provided by my infectious disease doctor.
Time's up. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to first thank all of the witnesses for being here, and in particular, Mrs. Faber and Mrs. Kravis for sharing your personal stories. It takes a lot of courage to come in public and to come before Parliament and share what we all view as very highly personal aspects of our lives, which is our health. And I think you're doing a great service to not only this committee and this Parliament, but to Canadians across country. So thank you for that. Dr. Lloyd, I'm going to start with you. If I think I wrote down your words verbatim, where you said that the framework, quote, fails to provide the leadership the community needs and fails patients, end quote. That's a pretty fundamental indictment of a framework that is, I think, intended to and should be geared towards making Canadians' health better. My first question is going to be, what's the first thing you would say needs to happen to this framework to correct that deficiency?
I would say that we need to bring the patient voice into it, because the current framework was written by the people who basically brought us to this position in the first place, and it endorses the status quo. And that's not the situation that we're facing in Canada. Jennifer and Sue have described what they are facing, and many other Canadians are doing that. So if you bring the patient voice into it, we can at least have the framework start to address the questions that are important to Canadians.
Thank you. Now, second, I think, an undercurrent of this entire discussion is that there appears to be some controversy. I think, Dr. Lloyd, you mentioned that there are divergent opinions, and you said your testimony was that we need a dialogue. Does the framework provide an adequate means to facilitate that essential dialogue, in your view?
No, it doesn't actually. It provides no opportunity for input or even updating the science. We need a way of feeding in new scientific discoveries as they happen, and they're happening very, very rapidly. And there is essentially no dialogue. There's no way to make this a living document.
Finally, my last question to you, Dr. Lloyd, is I really like the quote of former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden when he said, "Don't tell me your values, show me your budget, and I'll tell you your values." And so I want to zero in on the $4 million that this framework proposes to invest in research, and get your view on whether or not you feel that's sufficient in order to do the research necessary to attack this condition.
No scientist is ever going to say, "Oh, that's enough money." But perhaps
politicians either. Yeah.
I might actually break tradition there, and I would say it depends on how you're going to use the money. If it's more of the same, I don't actually think that's a very good use of the budget whatsoever. Canadian scientists are very good at scraping along with relatively little money, although we'd always like more, of course. What's important here is have that funding distributed in a transparent and peer-reviewed process. the framework already identifies policy priorities which essentially have tagged specific individuals and specific projects, and that's premature. It really is premature for policymakers to say this is good science and this is bad science. The expertise wasn't in the room when this framework was drafted. So there needs to be a broader call and a call directed towards the science community as well as the medical community, saying, what can you do? We've got a pot of $4 million. Tell us what's going to help Canadians, and then have that sent out to scientific peer review.
Thank you. Mrs. Faber, I wasn't quite clear. You testified very strongly about the struggle you had to get the medical establishment to listen to your, or frankly ignored your view that you could pass on Lyme disease congenitally. And I'm just wondering, I was unclear, are you saying that the connection between congenital transmission is present in the literature, but doctors just aren't aware, or that it's not present in the literature when it exists and it should be in the literature?
It is present in the literature, and that is why I'm going to be leaving this textbook. Remington and Klein, Infectious Diseases of the Fetus and Newborn Infant, Chapter 11 from 2001. And I just want to draw I'm just going to read one little paragraph in here, or a few. It is uncertain how many episodes of gestational toxemia, spontaneous miscarriage, spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, culture-negative neonatal sepsis, failure to thrive, developmental delay, congenital heart disease, or sudden infant death syndrome may be due to unrecognized gestational Lyme borreliosis. Determination of true risks to the fetus and infant of maternal gestational Lyme disease requires prospective studies on all pregnancy outcomes of gestational Lyme disease, long-term follow-up of live-born products of these pregnancies, and improved diagnosis of Lyme disease in affected fetuses, placentas, and infants. This chapter has over 888 references. It has been well cited. And here, so actually when I met with Public Health yesterday, and I asked them if they had had a chance, because we met with them about a month ago, and we shared this textbook with them and asked them if they had had an opportunity to read it. And the answer was no. I don't know if they knew it existed. Yesterday when we went to them, they still did not have a copy of this textbook. And so I truly hope that now that they have this resource in front of them, they will be able to understand that there is clear, defined information which points to congenital transmission. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, how many for time?
Time's up. Just up. Mr. Kong.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks all the witnesses for sharing your personal stories. And my questions are to Dr. Wet Lloyd. On the public forum, there was 500 participants from right across Canada. They participated over 3 days, and there were 100 speakers. They shared their personal experience, either in person or online. And speakers included patients, their families, and caregivers and healthcare professionals. And Doctor, you keep on saying, this framework is not a living document. There's something missing from the patient's input. You're not being specific, like what is missing in that framework. We want to, could you please make that clear? What is missing? And
At the end of the conference, and the conference brought together patients and scientists and medical professionals. At the end of that conference, there was a conference summary, and in fact it is, if you go to the online version of the framework, it's hyperlinked there. And if the summary couldn't capture all of those testimonials, but key reoccurring points were picked out. And if you check those reoccurring points, few to none of them show up in the document, and others have just been put in. So I presented in the surveillance section because I do ticks. And one the example I gave is that everyone agreed that showing surveillance maps with a dot saying there be ticks here is not meaningful because ticks are moved around by wildlife such as deer and birds and mice, and there are not a lot of places in Canada where there are no deer, birds and mice. So we all agreed that the way to do it is to show broader sections of Canada, high risk, low risk, but there's actually no area that's zero risk. That didn't show up. So that's one very small example. But in many ways, the conference summary should have been the framework. It did a phenomenal job of capturing not only the patient voice, which is critical, but also the current science. And there was current science presented on the fact that the bacteria actually survive the standard short-term antibiotic treatment, which is clinically critical, because if you undertreat the disease, then you're asking for antibiotic resistance. And this disease is bad enough as it is. The prospect of having an antibiotic-resistant Lyme disease is horrifying.
Okay, so
I can keep going, but I don't think we want to do that.
No, I don't want you to keep going. So in the surveillance, framework pillar, it says develop a tick-borne surveillance system for Lyme disease and other possible co-infections. Don't you think this will cover in that, what you just said?
Not unless we already have a surveillance system. We have to fix it and bring together all the people who think of different ways to do surveillance as opposed to just doing more of the same thing.
Okay, so you just assume that it will be the same thing. It will not be anything different. That's your assertion about this, or the scientific community as a whole, or
If it were to be different, I would think that would be indicated in the document, saying this is something different we can do to help Canadians, as opposed to a general statement made as in, we'll do something.
Thank you. My next question is to Janet Sperling. This is about the framework as well. The concerns about negative testing. Concerned about the false negative test results have led some patients to seek private testing. The development and availability of improved laboratory testing options may reduce the current practice where some patients seek testing in private for profit laboratories that may not be using standardized testing. So what is the rate of false negative test results for Lyme disease?
We have no idea. That's the problem, is that I can't give you an idea. I know that we do have a lot of false negatives. I don't know how many of these people actually have one of the co-infections. It's possible, and this is actually what my research is to look at all the bacteria in the tick. And when it comes to surveillance, I think that would be a great thing to do. We could find out that, for example, in Nova Scotia, there's a lot of Borrelia and maybe a lot of Rickettsia, whereas in Ontario, it's a lot of, Borrelia and Enterobacteriaceae, something like that, and we can march across. So as far as the false negatives go, one of the other questions is, how are you defining Lyme disease? If you're defining it as 2-tier positive, then, we're having a lot of problem here. I think we need to have a better grasp of tick-borne illness, of which Lyme disease is one of them. So I know it's a high rate, but I don't know what it is. I can't give you a number.
So do you have any record how often do individuals seek private testing, and how many labs in Canada?
The people who contact CanLyme, virtually everybody. Virtually everyone has gone through the current medical system. They have a real reason for believing that they have Lyme disease, and they seek private testing, sometimes in the U.S., sometimes in Europe. They haven't got any better answer.
Okay, so, how do the tests used in private testing facilities, they differ from those used by other healthcare providers?
In particular, the one most famous releases the banding pattern of the Western blot. And that's really the big thing that it does. It also looks at 2 strains of Lyme disease at the same time. So here in Canada, we test for 1 strain, and the big American lab tests for 1 on either and then reads the blot through it so you can get more information out of it.
Okay.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Dr. Carey, we're on our 5-minute questions now. So Dr. Carey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank the witnesses for being here today. To get right to the questions, now under the proposed framework, do you feel like your issues as a patient have been addressed? And if no, what exactly do you think this framework is missing? Could you elaborate, please?
I think the framework is missing an acknowledgement of the concept of tick-borne disease. As Janet Spurlett has pointed out, there are multiple infections, viruses, and bacteria that are all part of the disease, not just 1 strain. It doesn't address multiple strains of Borrelia, multiple species of ticks carrying Lyme disease. It doesn't address the reality that patients can't get help from medical doctors. Their doctors don't understand the disease. They're not educated. And it doesn't address the fact that we need education beyond pull up your socks and put repellent. We need education to people on what do you do if you get bitten, how to recognize them, where you're at risk, and how you need immediate treatment. That's kind of the main thing.
Sue, did you want to add anything?
Well, I guess my bent is congenital transmission, but we also need areas of the blood supply looked into, and we also need persistence looked into. Because why would someone like me be fully treated and cured, and 6 weeks after completing treatment be very, very sick again and not get help? And so instead of just saying that, we don't know what's wrong with you, let's engage and ask questions. And let's figure out what is wrong with you. And if it is a persistent infection, let's treat it. Let's treat it. Patients need treatment. They need to, let's just liken it to any other illness. I mean, if you go to the doctor with pneumonia and he says, your x-ray shows, a whiteout on your lungs, he's going to treat you with antibiotics. And if you come back a week later and he's like, oh my gosh, and you're not better. He says, well, let's flip over the antibiotic to something else because maybe it's resistant to this one. Doctors are trained to take a critical look at their patients, at the clinical presentation of their patients, and to treat them accordingly. But unfortunately, these guidelines, which are being followed, basically cage doctors in to not be able to do what they need to do for their patients, to help their patients live productive lives. So I would like to see that changed.
On Thursday, we are going to have Health Canada officials here. I was wondering if I could give you the opportunity, if there's questions you would like us to ask them. Is there one particular question? I note, Sue, that you mentioned you have this book that is referenced quite significantly, that you put it in front of them, but when you met with them, it was like they had no knowledge of it. So it's a little frustrating for us in committee here that we'd like to work with our colleagues in the bureaucracy. Is there something that you would like to really emphasize with Health Canada officials when they come forward next time?
I would like to say that it wasn't that there was no knowledge. Health Canada reported themselves in 1988 that transplacental transmission has been documented. When I spoke with Dr. New, I said to him, Dr. New, your agency has known for 29 years that this is happening, and why have you not done anything about it? And I said, why was it not in the framework? And his answer to me, if I remember correctly, was that the framework was a high-level document, and therefore issues like this were minor.
Right.
Or,
It wasn't minor. It was that the framework can't go into every possible study.
The framework can't go into every possible study. I correct myself. And so I said, so you mean the lives of my children and of babies yet to be born are not considered high-level, highly urgent issues? And he did not respond to me.
All right. How am I doing, Mr. Chair, for time?
We'll have another minute.
All right. Under the guidelines, there's a call for continued support for front-line health professionals and labs to diagnose Lyme disease. But despite the call, it's well known that misdiagnoses are like a major issue, a huge issue. So if you could emphasize, how many people are misdiagnosed due to insufficient tests? The current framework has no money allocated for better testing. Should there be? What are the consequences of continuing to ignore positive test results coming from non-accredited labs? A lot for a minute.
Is that for us?
Yes. Or Janet, if you.
Yeah. Okay. I think that the costs of having people being misdiagnosed are actually pretty slight, because most of the people who are getting this so-called false positive result get the treatment and they get better. And then one other thing, if I could, I just would really like to say, why aren't the patients represented? Because there's this kind of misunderstanding. In CanLime, we have a lot of people who are doctors. They are research scientists, geologists. I mean, we have a lot of people and a lot of expertise who would love to help, but they're being blocked. They're not being taken seriously. So that's my real question. Why is there this blocking of having the patient advocate in the room asking the difficult question?
No, that's
Time's up now.
excellent question. Thank you.
Dr. Elfson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for coming. My first question is for Dr. Lloyd. You mentioned that there were examples of peer-reviewed research that was ignored. Now, I know it's, I only have 5 minutes, so I can't go into the details of all of it. But just very briefly, can you give me a couple of examples of, say, authors and what their research had shown? Maybe just one or two examples.
Specifics, not off the top of my head, but I will give you examples. So depending on which public health website you look at, the tick must be attached for either 24, 48, or 72 hours in order to transmit the disease. There are, however, reports showing transmission within 24 hours.
Okay, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, but would you at some point in the future be able to find that information and send it to us from the specifics, who these authors are and what their research was? Okay, thank you. No, that's what I do. Okay, Ms. Sperling, you mentioned the tests. Now, I understand there's the two-step test. The Centers for Disease Control talks about the enzyme immunoassay and the immunofluorescence assay, or what's called a Western blot.
Okay, I would have called it an EIA and IFA as one group, or a Western blot. The way I understand it, you can do an EIA or an IFA, followed by a more specific Western blot.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now, you talked about this specific blot with the banding pattern.
Yeah.
Is this done regularly at all centers in the United States?
Yes, absolutely. In order to get the diagnosis of Lyme disease, you have to have that Western blot. Yeah.
All right. And if someone has a Western blot, I mean, for instance, will a Western blot without that banding, what is the advantage of this Western blot with the banding over just a standard Western blot that you'd get done at a Canadian lab?
It's a Western blot, but in the case of the national lab, if you have 5 or more bands, it's reported as positive. If you have 4 or fewer, it's reported as negative. So you don't know if you had 4 out of 10 or if you had 6 out of 10. So all we're saying is if people could say, and the other thing is that one of those bands is a pretty general band. It's a P41. And if that one's positive, that's much less significant than some of the other bands, which are much more specific to Lyme disease.
Okay. Now, would you be able to, again, it's too specific in the, 2.5 minutes I have left now. Would you be able to forward us the literature on that accuracy of that versus the standard Western blot?
Sorry, it's the reporting of the bands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, but
Yeah.
the reporting of it. Yeah. Is there literature that talks about diagnostic accuracy of one versus the other? And could you forward that to us?
Each European country has a different standard. I can show you that.
Okay.
So
all right.
I will forward the different European countries. Some choose 3 as positive. Some choose, whatever number as positive. But I can send you that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Dr. Lloyd, we were talking about with treatment and the guidelines we're using. Now, there is some controversy as to how long you should be treating with antibiotics, and whether whether prolonged Lyme disease is a prolonged, chronic Lyme disease is a prolonged infection, or there are in fact more side effects due to the original damage during the disease. I know
Yes.
there's controversy in the literature on that. Now, both the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control recommend strongly against prolonged antibiotics. They state on both these organizations that that several well-controlled scientific studies have shown no significant improvement in outcomes with them, and a number of cases of people having to be admitted to hospital due to complications of the long-term antibiotics. Because we know that antibiotics themselves do have their own complications if used inappropriately. So how do you respond to that, and what is the research that refutes this from these organizations?
There are studies that show that there was no improvement with longer antibiotic use. There are other studies that showed improvement. I would point out with some of the studies.
Yeah, sorry, I have 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Can you quote at least one of the studies that shows improvement? Who can you tell me the author of that study and what it was?
I can certainly send that to you.
All right.
I can send it to you.
Okay.
I will point out that the study that showed no improvement essentially repeated a non-productive intervention. And really, if something didn't work the first time, the odds of it working the second time are remote.
Well, from the NIH website is actually several studies that they're citing.
Yes.
It's not just one. It's a number of studies. I just wanted to
both
clarify that.
forms, sir.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. My time's up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Chair, I'm just going to refer to page 26 of the framework document under guidelines and best practices, key messages. It indicates here, it says here that doctors are constrained by the current guidelines and in many cases lack awareness of the disease. It also says physicians who treat Lyme disease patients outside the existing treatment guidelines should be protected from sanctions from their licensing organization. Do you know of cases of doctors who are losing their licenses because they're going beyond the guidelines, beyond the treatment? And if so, how many?
We are aware of several doctors who have been harassed or sanctioned, not necessarily specifically for prescribing antibiotics, sometimes on other areas found during the investigation, but there are at least 1, 2, 3 doctors that I can think of, 4 doctors on the top of my head, 3 doctors who have retired or been sanctioned because of sanction and harassment, and there's 1 doctor who was investigated and harassed such that he ceased to see Lyme patients in his practice.
That's surprising, unbelievable. Actually, so that is why when you go, they say they have nothing they can do for you because they cannot go beyond the prescribed guidelines. And so that's hence why you are off to some other country to seek treatment there. Can I ask, you mentioned you spent $100,000 just on your treatment alone going to the States, you and your children, or?
I've spent about $300,000 on my own treatment, and I've just had my kids assessed by a neurologist in Manhattan. That visit cost $15,000 to get them assessed and tested for all the different co-infections that they may have, because treatment is not effective if you're not hitting all the diseases. And I've been told that they're going to require possibly 1 to 3 years of continuous treatment, which will cost tens of thousands more.
Wow. Also on 26, it says that there's a need, of course, for more Lyme literate doctors. How many are there in Canada, Lyme literate doctors that are treating? I know that Dr. Hawkins in Calgary, people are lined up outside his door. He can't accept any more patients. Obviously, we have a shortage of Lyme disease doctors. Any thoughts on that?
One of the other things I'd like to say is that there are Lyme literate doctors for adults, but there are no, to my knowledge, Lyme literate doctors for children. So for children who present with chronic systemic illness, such as my daughters, they cannot seek help or treatment here in Canada. And no child can receive help or treatment with chronic systemic illness in Canada because we are told it does not exist.
Wow. Back to my granddaughter and hiking again. I suggest all Canadians stay the heck out of the woods if that's the case, if there's no treatment for children for tick bites.
Well, it's not that they're not going to be treated for tick bites. It's the children who weren't treated for tick bites who then get systemically ill, or the children who are born in utero with this illness who aren't going to get treatment.
I know Rachel Lee had some questions. Do you want to throw anything out right now? Or?
Thank you.
Okay, I just thought I'd offer that. Mr. Chair, how much more time have I got here? Okay, all right. Let's see here. Have you got anything, Dr. Carey, there there's many questions I have for the health agency on Thursday and the blood services. Oh yes, Mr. Arnold. Yeah.
The proposed framework highlights the current challenges associated with Lyme disease testing. Just to cut this really briefly, what changes do you think should be made that aren't listed in the framework to testing and so on?
That's a great question to ask Dr. Hawkins on Thursday, because he is very familiar with the science and the mechanisms of the testing, and he has some suggestions on using existing testing technology under a different set of criteria that would significantly improve testing in Canada.
Okay, thanks very much. Now we go to Mr. Ayoub.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I don't know if you understand very well French, but I'm going to go, my testimony is going to be in French, my question. La différence
The difference of treatment, or the difference of approach to the treatment, I'll wait till everyone's plugged in, I guess. English channel should be on channel 1. Floor 1 or 2. Okay? The difference of approach or treatment vis-a-vis chronic Lyme disease and the Lyme disease proper is fairly significant. Scientifically, at least, it looks to be quite a bit of difference. And there's some controversy as well. But we always try to approach it from a scientific point of view, evidence-based, when one prescribes medications, for example. There are always secondary effects and by-effects, if you will, of any treatment, of any product. How do you address this distinction in your report? Where do you think there might be flaws or shortcomings or gaps? I think we have to, you'd have to speak with Dr. Hawkins. He has a clinical diagnostic approach, and he will be able to tell you what will work and what will not work in terms of antibiotics, for example, and look for another approach to the treatment. So one would have to change the mode of treatment if there's some resistance or the particular antibiotic doesn't work. So he needs a clinical approach, a diagnostic first. Well, there's a difference in approach, let's say, between Canadian ways of treating with Lyme and the United States. We have some unfortunate Canadians who would have to go to the States to get their treatment at exorbitant costs, of course, but $300,000, if I got you correctly. You can imagine, it's completely out of mind, out of reach for most Canadians, $300,000. Be that as it may. The differences in treatment or approach in the States, and why this is admissible or inadmissible in the States, and how we might be able to bridge the difference. And well, the major difference is that in the United States, a physician can prescribe a treatment or a therapy for a longer term of time. Here in Canada, it's much more difficult because, first of all, there's insurance concerns. The coverage isn't as great. And in the United States, it's $400 to consult with a doctor, first of all. Here, it's $40 for a doctor's visit. That's a large difference. If we could prescribe a longer period for antibiotic use, that would resolve a lot of the issue. But why the controversy? What's the controversial point here? Where's the contention? The difficulty? Well, the difficulty is that You can't have a black and white clinical diagnostic. It's very, well, it's no different. The diagnostic is a diagnostic in the States or in Canada. Yes, but the interpretation is different. There's a greater range of interpretation, if you will, in the United States. You know, here it's a bit more rigid. It's 2 to 4 weeks. That's it for a course of the antibiotics. But the medical system as a whole, I much prefer the Canadian system. However, we're kind of locked in on this 2 to 4 weeks of antibiotic exposure, and then that's it. We cut you off. So it's quite different from the IDSA system. All right, I think my time is going to lapse on me, so I'll ask a final question. Awareness, education point of view, I think that's very, very important. I was listening to Ms. Faber's testimony, and I think you had to shop around diligently before you found a doctor who was compliant and compassionate. So what can we do about that?
Yes, well, we need to train our doctors so that they're aware of the concern in the first place. One of the things I actually spoke to Dr. New about yesterday, which I'm actually very excited about, and he agreed with me on, was he agreed to reach out to the Canadian Pediatric Society and the Canadian Society of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, as well as the College of Midwives, as well as I would like to include the College of Family Doctors, and to make an introduction to them on my behalf, and to request that these agencies and societies and associations meet with Jennifer and I as patient representation and advocates, and also speaking to the literature that unfortunately has not been available in Canada. And so I'm really thrilled that he has taken that initiative to do that on our behalf, and he will also hopefully be able to introduce the reality that 29 years ago Health Canada did report congenital transmission. So I'm really excited to that forward momentum, because I believe that's exactly what is required, is for, just as Dr. Vet Lloyd has said, and Janet Sperling, that patients and advocates and people, including our researchers and our physicians, need to be actively engaged and involved and at the table together. So I really look forward to those meetings and to forward progression and movement there. Thank you.
Okay, time's up, but I'd just like to follow up on a question that Mr. Ayoub had, and that is, if a doctor diagnoses me with Lyme disease and says I need 8 or 10 weeks of antibiotics, who says he can't do that? He can't prescribe that.
The doctor can get away with it once, and he might be able to get away with it twice, but it's eventually somebody's going to start saying, how come that person keeps having these people and he keeps giving them long-term antibiotic?
What person says that?
The colleges.
Colleges?
And I can think of 3 doctors right off. Mm-hmm. And they didn't go in saying, we are closing you down for your treatment of Lyme disease. They said, we're going in and we're investigating something else. But they happened to take every file of somebody who had Lyme disease. So I think it really comes down to the idea that mostly it's not the patients making the complaint. The patients are generally very happy with their doctors. It's that the other doctors are saying, that doctor keeps giving out too much antibiotic. You got to shut him down. So it's happening behind closed doors.
So it's the College of Physicians in each province that is the police department. All right, thank you. Okay.
I can give you names later.
All right.
It's awful.
Mr. Davies, 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I want to focus a bit on education and awareness. One of the, I guess, basic concepts that's come out for me very strongly from the testimony here today is that wherever the differences may lie, we're looking at a serious pan-Canadian health issue with some urgency. And ideally, I think what we want to do is educate Canadians and try to prevent. I mean, to me, sometimes the best health approach is to prevent the disease or condition in the first place. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, any of the witnesses, that you could give this committee in terms of guidance, in terms of the education and awareness steps that we ought to be recommending to the government so that Canadians are more fully aware and maybe can take steps to protect themselves.
So prevention is absolutely key, because obviously if you don't get bitten by a tick, you're not going to get sick. But the reality is ticks are so tiny, they can be microscopic, the size of poppy seeds. It's not possible to 100% prevent ticks. And education has been great on that, pulling your socks up, staying in the middle of the path, using repellent. But the education has stopped there. And people now need to know the prevalence of the risk, that it's not just in endemic areas. And they need to know, what do I do when I find a tick? Where do I go? What do I look out for? What are the signs and symptoms of the disease? Because they're varying. And the urgency of immediate treatment. And as well, we need education for doctors. And as well, the issue of children is very urgent, because kids are a very high risk group for Lyme disease, one of the highest risk groups because of the time they spend outside. We need schools to have training on how to remove ticks in the principal's office. We need summer camps to train their counselors on how to do tick checks. So there's a huge gap in the education, because to date it has only focused on pulling your socks up and putting repellent on. It doesn't go any further than that.
It's often said that lacrosse is the national sport of Canada, but I actually think it's determining whether something's federal, provincial, or municipal in this country. So, Mr. Chair, sort of raised this issue about the impact of provincial colleges of physicians and surgeons, and obviously provincial governments which administer healthcare in this country. I'm just wondering, being federal politicians here, what you would advise us to do in terms of helping to get the provinces to make the kinds of changes necessary, or that you think are necessary, and how, whether you have specific recommendations on the curricula that are being taught in medical schools, and whether that's something you'd like to see us involved in. Are you putting pressure on provincial governments as well?
We will be. We've been busy the last couple of months here.
I know that Dr. Hawkins is very interested in medical education, and that is something that he is highly qualified to discuss, and I'm sure he would be more than happy to be involved in the development and design of proper modules to train our upcoming medical students as well as current physicians, both as family doctors and specialists. Thank you.
And I want to thank the witnesses very much for coming. We have the most interesting meetings at this committee. And you talked earlier about the voice of victims not being heard, but your voices were heard today. You've been broadcast all through this on the internet, and you will be on CPAC as well, and reruns. So your voices are starting to be heard, and that's part of our process in the committee. And I think when I met with you earlier, I told you things take a long time here, but they do happen. And I believe that process is underway thanks to C442. I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Lloyd. I noticed you broke your pen about 3 times during the meeting. I'm going to make sure you get a new pen from the Parliament of Canada. And I'd like you to tell us what is your work in this area in Lyme disease and ticks. I just know you've worked on it for some time, but I don't know what your work has been. And have you gotten any funding from the government?
I work primarily on ticks, so figuring out what diseases they have and essentially supporting communities that when people find a tick on them, to test it, because that's not necessarily available in all parts of Canada. Some parts of Canada, a tick on a person can get tested through the National Microbiology Lab, but other places it cannot be. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I think it was about your pen. But
yeah.
Government funding. Have you gotten any funding from any level of government for this?
Yes, I'm funded by both the federal and the provincial level, as well as by the Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you very much, and I'm going to give Ms. May a second. But anyway, I just want to say thank you for the good work that you've done, and thanks to the witnesses. And we look forward. Thursday will be an interesting day as well. And Ms. May, would you like to?
Forgive me, Mr. Chair. I just had wanted to ask Dr. Lloyd, you mentioned earlier you had lists and you thought they'd be boring. But if you have lists of factual errors in the current framework, if they haven't been tabled with the committee, as a member, I'm not a member of the committee, so I don't have it. But I'm hoping that if you have such lists, can you make sure we have them? Because I regarded it, and to apologize to, I know I respect you so much, Dr. Lloyd, and I know I gave a fairly favorable view of what we could do with this framework. It may be, silk purse out of sow's ear time, but I think the framework dodged the bullet of being really unacceptable, which was what the draft looked like. And I think we made some progress between the draft and the final. But I would like very much to know of all the specifics, as particularly factual errors that you spotted in the framework. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, thanks very much to the witnesses. We appreciate your time very much. Thank you. Okay, now we have the thalidomide letter to deal with. We're going to go into committee business. I don't think it'll take long. I don't know, unless there are. Aren't we going to do the thalidomide letter?
Yes.
No. We don't have time to do the antimicrobial. I don't think.
Maybe just suspend.
Suspend. There, thank you.
This is if we want to.
Okay, presumably they cut us off.